When you see me, what do you think? No, no, no. I can hear what you're saying. Damn, that's a sexy 6'5", 300-pound man with the body of a Greek god. And I agree with you. But just like every other Greek god, I have my weaknesses. And my weakness just so happens to be a 2006 Adam Sandler film where he stops time to fart in his boss's face. That's right, today we're talking about Click. Click is a 2006 Adam Sandler movie where he uses a remote control to fast forward through his life. And would you be surprised if I told you that of every movie I have ever watched in my whole life, which is a lot of movies, this is the only movie that consistently makes me cry every single time I watch it. And that's not even an exaggeration. I've probably seen this movie maybe 7, 8 times in my whole life, and I have cried 7 or 8 times. I literally cannot make it through this movie without crying. And to top it off, it has a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is blasphemous, but I'll get into that later. Now, I do want to talk about this movie for a little bit because not only is it the only movie that ever makes me cry consistently, but it's also a lot deeper than you might give it credit for. The way I describe it is that it's an Adam Sandler movie where he stops time to fart in his boss's face, and it's also the movie that I can't stop crying at. You know? Because once it gets around the like 2/3 point of the movie, you'll definitely notice a strong shift in tone. It's definitely less goofy and goes on to full, almost a drama. And I just wanted to go through this movie real quick and just talk about it because it's one of those movies that I watch maybe once every other year, and it's one of the movies that just hits me very hard right in the feels, and I feel like it's kind of under the radar, but I'm just gonna go through the movie real quick. So we start our story with Adam Sandler, and just like in every Adam Sandler movie, he has an incredibly hot wife and he has 2 kids. Adam Sandler's character is also an up and coming star working as an architect at his company. And Adam Sandler's character, his name's Michael, but it's Adam Sandler. He's not exactly an absentee father, but he's definitely a father that puts the work above his children. He cancels multiple plans. He doesn't follow through with some of his promises because he's working. And while he does say something that some might agree with, where he's saying that he's just doing this to an end and to the point where he can get a promotion at his job to where he can hire people like himself to take care of his load and then he can spend more time with his family. But in the meantime, he is somewhat of an absentee father. He skips out on family meals, swim meets, that kind of stuff, just, trying, because he's always busy with his work. Also, a small thing that happens in this movie is Rob Schneider kind of does like a little bit of brown face at some point. I didn't know this as a kid. I just thought I didn't know who that was. I didn't know it was Rob Schneider, but I thought it was funny because they called him Prince Hubba Bubba, which is a gum, and I like the name Hubba Bubba, and I thought that was funny. But anyways, after a small fight with his wife, he ends up going to Bed Bath and Beyond to try to find a universal remote for the TV that he can't figure out how to work. He eventually finds himself in the back of the Beyond section of Bed Bath and Beyond, where he meets Morty, who's played by Christopher Walken, and I love this character. Anyways, Morty gives him a universal remote that controls the actual real world around him. So Adam Sandler eventually figures out how to use this remote, where he just starts skipping all the mundane parts of his life, like family dinners, massages before sex with his wife, traffic, some small things like that, just so he can start working more and more and more. Because that's all he wants to do right now is work, so he can eventually, maybe, hopefully, get a promotion. Also, around this time, another thing that kind of dates this movie a little bit is that they make fun of a sexual harassment seminar, which, again, I thought was goofy, almost 20 years ago, whenever I was a kid, but I can understand that might be a little bit of a problem nowadays, but that might be something that would get cut, in today's world. So at this point, all is well. Adam Sandler has been skipping more of the mundane parts of his life. He's gotten able to work, did good work. He's turned it in, and he thinks that he got a promotion for landing this deal as an architect. And so he starts celebrating with his kids and his wife, and he goes and buys his kids bikes and buys his wife some nice jewelry before actually knowing that he, in fact, did not get the promotion just yet. He's got to work a little bit more for it. And so what he ends up doing is he ends up, using the remote to fast forward to his next promotion. And this is where things kind of start getting a little weird because he thinks it'll only be maybe 3 months, but it actually turns out he skipped an entire year. Oh, I forgot to mention, when Michael figures out that he actually does not have the promotion just yet, one of the best scenes in cinema history unfolds. Behold.
means it's gonna take me months. And you better get started. What? I hung out with your friend Jenny this weekend. No. You got more.
Pure poetry. So he fast forwards a year into the future where he gets his promotion, where he finds his marriage is in distress, his kids are kind of distant, and his dog dies. Which, that already hits me right there in the feels, and we're only halfway through this movie. Also, again, another thing that might get cut today, a little bit of transphobia there with Adam Sandler's assistant ends up being trans, turns into a man, and they kind of poke fun at it. So again, something that might get cut nowadays, but this is 18 years ago. Things were different. So oh well. I just figured out that I had my earbud in the whole time. I didn't need that. Oops. So Adam Sandler tracks down Morty again. He doesn't like the fact that he has skipped a whole year of his life and tries to return the remote, but the remote can't be returned. And he also learns that the remote is learning. So anytime Adam Sandler ends up skipping a meal or skipping sex or skipping sickness, which he does a lot, he skips sickness. Anytime that happens, the remote will automatically do it because that's what the remote interpreted that he wants. So eventually Adam Sandler makes his way to his boss where he finds out that his boss could actually give him another promotion, which sets the remote off because the remote is a learning remote. Once they hear the word promotion, it automatically skips to his next promotion, which this time just so happens to be 10 years in the future. So a lot can happen in 10 years, and Adam Sandler wakes up weighing over 300 pounds. And instead of wearing it like an Adonis like me, he's just fat. And they make a lot of fat jokes. And I'm not gonna lie to you, they're kind of funny. I'm not gonna sit here and say, like, as a somewhat chunky man myself, I think I can say the fat jokes are pretty funny. They're all right. I mean, it's a fat joke. You either love them or hate them. There's no in between. So he finds out that him and his wife got divorced. His kids don't like him. She got remarried to the swim coach, and he never finished the treehouse that he promised he did 12 years ago at this point, I think. So eventually this other dog trips him, makes him bump his head, and the remote auto skips 6 more years into the future because it turns out he had cancer and it skipped his illness. And I do want to make a point that this movie has been pretty much a comedy for the most part. I mean, again, comedy's subjective. I mean, whether you think it's funny or not, that's what it was aiming for, was comedy. And once this skip happens, this is probably the point where it turns more into a drama than a comedy. And again, that's a little bit more subjective, but this is the part where things take a little bit of a darker turn. So Michael figures out that he's the head of his company. He's lost all the weight. Same with his son. His son was fat too. It was actually played by Jonah Hill, which is kind of funny. But they're both skinny now. He's the head of his company, and he finds out that his dad actually died during this last skip. And he has to go visit his grave and wants to actually see the last time he saw him. And this is a part that gets me almost every time. I'd say about 80% of the time I watch this movie, this is the part that makes me cry. So we take a peek at the last interaction Adam Sandler's Michael had with his father. And turns out that his dad came to his work wanting to just have a boys' day, just have a nice day off, forget about work, forget about the wives, have a nice just father, son, and grandson day where they just go around, get some ice cream, talk to some girls, that kind of thing. And Michael completely blows him off, makes him cry, and makes him leave because he's completely focused on his work. He doesn't have time for family. He doesn't have time for anything other than his work because that's what the remote wants. That's what the remote thinks Michael wants because he skipped all the family time. He only wants to work. That's why the remote skips all this, and that's why the remote makes him act like a fucking asshole because that's what he is. He's an asshole. But since they're in this kind of spectator mode, Michael pauses time, says goodbye to his dad, visits his grave, and then we find out that Morty, who's been in every time skip so far, is actually an angel of death, which is kind of just a weird turn. I mean, we already knew that he was kind of supernatural because he's not aging, but he says that he took Adam Sandler's dad, which just kind of makes him an angel of death, but that doesn't really change the story because we already knew that Morty was some kind of supernatural thing. But anyways, Yeah, that happens. So during that confrontation, Michael skips one last time to his son's wedding, which is a couple more years into the future. And he's having a good time and everything's relaxed until he ends up having a heart attack. And this is an actual, real bad heart attack, not like his last one. So for the final scene, Michael wakes up in the hospital, surrounded by his family, being kept alive by machines, where his son tells him that he postponed his honeymoon so he could attend a work conference. And then they leave. They say goodbye. Michael's sitting there trying his hardest to speak to his son to tell him, don't do that, but he just can't because he's too weak. So what Michael ends up doing is he actually ends up tearing out all the wires and the machines that are keeping him alive and rushes towards his son, who's getting in a car to leave. While he's doing this, he's also getting told by Morty to stop because those machines are keeping him alive and he will die. But Adam Sandler doesn't care. He needs to talk to his son, so he sprints out of the hospital in the pouring rain, falls down. He's screaming for his son. This is another part that gets me, man. This is another part that just gets me teary-eyed and gets a little, someone's cutting onions in here, you know what I'm saying? But he's screaming for his son. He wants to talk one last time. And so they eventually see each other, and they all huddle together. And Michael has his one last talk with his son, where he pretty much says goodbye to everyone and says family comes first, where he eventually dies. And then the twist of the century, baby. It was actually a dream. Some people might say that's lazy, but I actually think this movie did it pretty well. See, at the beginning of the movie, he ends up taking a nap at Bed Bath & Beyond on one of the, the model beds. And he wakes up there. The whole movie was a dream. But, he awakes with this new sense of life and wonder and all that. And he ends up running home, telling his kids he's going on a camping trip, wants to live his life. But he goes into the kitchen and finds the remote there with a note from Morty saying that his wife is hot and try to appreciate all the moments that you have with your family. And the remote is still there. He has the option. And so he picks up the remote and throws it away. And then he just lives his life, appreciating every moment with his family. And real quick, as a side note, the credit song slaps. It's great. It's one of my favorite songs. You Give What You Give by the New Radicals. Just a good song. Listen to it. It's also at the end of one of my favorite movies, my favorite animated movies, Surf's Up. It's the same song. So I like the song. So it kind of put me in a good mood after that. But that's Click, that's the whole movie. There's no end credit scene. There's no nothing. It's just, that's the end of the movie. And I like it, It's got a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. I feel like that's low. Is the humor crude? Yes. Is it kind of dated? Extremely. It's got a good message. It's got heart to it a little bit. And it's the only movie that has made me cry on every single watch. And I just can't help it. And I think it's because I have a pretty good relationship with my dad. And, seeing the father figure, who's also played by Henry Winkler, who's the Fonz and Happy Days. So, that's cool for, people who know that show. But seeing him cry at that last interaction he had with his son, that always sets me off. Seeing, Adam Sandler reaching for his son, needing to tell him that his, that family comes first. That always gets me. It just gets me, and it's one of those movies that really fly under the radar. It's one of Adam Sandler's more forgotten movies, and I don't think it should be. There's a lot of things wrong with this movie. I'm not trying to say it's one of the best movies ever made, but I would definitely think it's better than a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb has it as 6.4. That's definitely more accurate. That's almost exactly what I would put. I'd say it's 6.5. But that's about it. It's a movie that's not super popular. It's not a movie that's talked about a lot, and I think it should be because it does have a very good message, and it's kind of deeper than you'd think it might be on the surface. But that's all I got for you. I just wanted to talk about it for a little bit, and I'll see you on the streams.